Hey everyone, I wanted to go over the new and exciting news that we got for Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak, which is set to release on both the Nintendo Switch and on PC on June 30th. And at the same time, give my reactions to the most recent digital event Capcom presentation that they did for May, where they basically went ahead and showcased not just a brand new trailer, but they went over a couple of brand new details that simply we did not know of before. So first and foremost, one of the biggest things that we had been expecting was the introduction of a brand new map, and that simply did not seem to happen. They seem to just be continuing the idea that the Citadel will be the only new map presented. They didn't even necessarily show a brand new arena of any type, so all we seem to be getting as of right now will be just the Citadel and nothing else. Presumably there will be more information revealed at some point in June. This is something that they touched upon at the back end of the presentation when they spoke about updates and stuff like that, maybe a roadmap being introduced. Free title updates is what they actually worded it as, but no necessarily details as to a brand new map. So it seems to be like another massive map introduction is not going to be in the works. What they did showcase, though, of course, is the fact that Seregios will be returning into the series. This is something that they mentioned before, where he's the flagship of Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate, and this is a rather popular monster. And one of the reasons why they're bringing him back is because he has the bleed effect, and it seems like Malzeno also has the bleed effect as well. So this is something that we knew with like Shogun Senator also having a bleed effect, and a couple of other monsters being tweaked in that same regard. So it seems to be like the bleed effect coming back kind of like defaulted them for bringing back Seregios, which is always a popular monster and one that doesn't necessarily should be that much of a surprise to anyone. Now they did also showcase two brand new such species. One of them is called Aurora Somnicanth. This seems to be an icy version of Somnicanth, where now kind of has just ice-based attacks. This makes a lot of sense since, like we talked about before, in the Citadel, you have those three separate biomes. You have the forest, you have the castle, and you have the northern icy area where Lunagarin roams. So them introducing a brand new ice monster kind of introduces, you know, the concept of, hey, there's going to be more than just Lunagarin walking around the Citadel, so that's always well and good. This being, of course, a Master Rank, G Rank monster as well, it gives you the idea that Somnicanth is going to be tweaked to a certain point, where one of the biggest criticisms that Somnicanth had was that it was kind of a little bit of a pushover. It doesn't have a lot of health. Its abilities are kind of like very hit or miss. So presumably this subspecies of Somnicanth, the Aurora version, is going to be really menacing because it doesn't have to really rely on any sort of like flashing attacks or putting you to sleep or any sort of gimmick like that. It can just flat out focus on combat and just icy debuffs, and you know, that's always well and good. So hopefully this one is a little bit more of a challenge than the basic Somnicanth, even presumably in Master Rank. The other subspecies that they decided to introduce was Magma Allmother. Now this is a fire version essentially of Allmother. He's no longer mud based or water based. This one is going to be pretty much just full lava. So they did specifically say that this one is going to be appearing in the like volcano area or whatever. This is not going to be appearing presumably in the Citadel, and this one is going to be like diving into underground doing fire attacks. It does seem to have a fire and rage mode as well, once it kind of like eats up lava from underground in the volcano. So they are kind of like saying monsters that are going to be introduced for Sunbreak most likely don't always have to necessarily show up in the Citadel, and that's Magma Allmother. He doesn't necessarily have to appear in the Citadel at all. We have seen Blood Orange Bishaten in the Citadel already. They did showcase Somnicanth, Aurora Somnicanth in the Citadel a little bit in one of the clips. Every other monster has been in the Citadel. This one is the first one that we have seen not appearing in the Citadel as of yet. So this is why I think this is something worth of note, that presumably any other monsters that they decide to introduce in the future could potentially not necessarily be tied to the Citadel, which is always good. Now they didn't necessarily announce any new monsters or anything like that. Again, subspecies, I wouldn't necessarily consider new monsters. They're just subspecies. They're just already different versions of a monster that was already introduced before. Seregios returning is all well and good, but again, not necessarily new. So we'll just have to wait and see. They did, once again, I'll reiterate, they did mention that in June they're going to start providing new information. Maybe that means they do another digital event. I doubt it. That'll be really close to the release of the game. But if they decide to do that, hopefully they bring us, you know, more monsters, because as of right now it's looking a little bit thin. And when they specifically mentioned the whole thing about free title updates, they didn't mention like introducing new monsters or anything like that. So right now, if they are just simply withholding information and they want people to just kind of be surprised as, you know, monsters are kind of like available in the game, but they don't want to tease them ahead of time, maybe that is the route that they're choosing to go. We spoke about this in a couple of videos that I made in the past. Maybe they're choosing to go that route, but at the end of the day, it seems a little bit sparse for an expansion to just have almost like 6 to 7 monsters being introduced, including such species. So we'll just have to wait and see how they go about doing that. They did also touch upon the mystery of Malzeno a little bit in the trailer and then in the post-presentation thing. You know, not really nothing necessarily that we didn't already know. I will take 100% credit of them actually showcasing the concept art shots, which is something that I've already made several videos of for each one of the monsters, where they showcase the concept art. They've never showed concept art in any of the presentations before, and this one specifically, they decided to showcase some of the concept arts that I've kind of showcased in my videos as well. So I think maybe one of the persons in Capcom Japan is paying attention to my videos, and they decided like, hey, we have this awesome concept art, let's just go ahead and show it because this is appealing to people. And they showcase, of course, in the concept art a bunch of the things that I already spoke about, and even some of the translations that I made, which was very, you know, off the cuff kind of a thing. I kind of nailed those as well. So, you know, pretty good stuff in that regard. They do showcase that basically the secret is he kind of sucks out the life force out of people and other monsters, and he's very dangerous and threatening. You know, again, not necessarily that big of a surprise. It was kind of expected. Did this showcase some of the gameplay? He seems to be really menacing. He's also rather big, way bigger than what some of the clips would have led you to believe. So he's certainly going to be a little bit of a menace. And of course, he also has the bleed effect as well. They did not, however, show him climbing the tower at all, which is something that I was expecting for them to do, but it doesn't seem to be like perhaps it's something that he's going to end up doing at the end of the day, probably because he's just too big. We'll just have to wait and see. Maybe there's, again, a hidden ability or anything like that that we haven't seen before. Also, they did talk about him having a second stage, but of course they just teased that. They didn't necessarily show it. So he does seem to like kind of have an enraged mode that is really dangerous. He kind of encloaks himself, very shadowy kind of a thing going on. They showcase it in the trailer multiple times, but of course we'll just have to wait and see how that shakes out to be. Now, one of the things that they spoke about was skill swaps. I'm not necessarily going to try to get into that right now. I think I'm going to make a separate video and try to dig into that a little bit deeper, only because there was a lot of information to take away from that, and I didn't quite understand it all together, realistically speaking. So I'm probably going to have to like dig into that a little bit, get a better understanding of it. But it seems to be like you are mixing up certain silkbind attacks, certain attacks, and you are kind of like getting the benefit out of both of them, and you can actually have different palettes to mix them up as well. So that seems to be what that's going to be about. But again, every single one of the weapons is going to have tweaked abilities and silkbind attacks and skill attacks and all of that kind of stuff. So ultimately, trying to like figure it out without really having read up on it, you know, I'm not really going to do that right now. But that is something that is one of the biggest features that they spoke about in this specific presentation. Now, the last thing that I do want to touch upon is the follower quest. This is pretty much targeting single player content players, basically people who seems to perhaps be having a little bit of a struggle playing single player. You are now going to be able to bring in presumably one or maybe even multiple. They do showcase both Hanoa and Minoto in one of them, so presumably you can bring more than one character to assist you in a very specific quest, and you are going to be able to do this with like AI hunters essentially. They are going to be kind of like doing their own thing. They can lay down traps, they can heal, they have their own palicos, their own palamutes, whatever it might be, and they can be support as well. So not only do you have both of your pets, your palico and your palamute, but then you're going to have a follower hunter as well. This is also presumably to kind of like balance master rank. They didn't say this was master rank only, G rank only, but presumably this is going to be one of those like for people who are really struggling with master rank. They cannot necessarily nail down a specific hunt by themselves, even with the assistance of the palicos and the palamutes and all the silkbind attacks and the skill switches and all that kind of stuff. Even with all that, you presumably you cannot handle a quest. You bring in a hunter assist. You are going to be able to have backup AI assist you in that specific hunt. So that could be a really good thing for people who need the help with. But at the end of the day, they seem to be cherry picking what quest you're going to be doing that with. It's not going to be with any quest in the way that they worded it. But of course, that can certainly change as well. that seems to be all the information that they provided us with in this specific presentation. It was rather short. I think was a little underwhelming. The last two presentations, I feel personally that they were a little bit underwhelming. But at the end of the day, I think they are most likely withholding more details as they are readying for the presentation, for the release of the game. If you are brand new to my channel, be sure to leave a like and subscribe. Hit the bell to receive notifications when the videos go up. And as always, thank you so much for watching. See ya.